Hi everyone. Today we're going to discuss some of the or one of the very important issues in our world today. As we all know, that the world is in a crazy place, particularly in the area of the social issues. We see what's happening in the world with regards to the area of relationships, marriage, sexuality, all of which has pretty much gone against the natural order of the way things were created and how it is created to be and to function and to work within society and with regards to the way mankind was supposed to carry out themselves and how we're supposed to relate with each other and at the same time protecting the concerns regarding relationships, sexuality, that have a huge impact on society, has a huge impact on children, and a whole host of other areas within the world that we live in. But I think the most important thing to reflect on, and for some reason, many choose to ignore that, or rather, I would say it's probably a rebellious proposition or position that most people take, especially when it comes to sexuality and marriage and so on, with the inclusion of same-sex marriage and a whole host of other issues like transgender and so on and so forth. All of which, like I said, have a very negative impact on society. It takes away the good of society and it leaves the society with a lot of bad. And we see the repercussions of that whenever one allows more bad or evil things to take precedence. Then automatically those compounds, you end up having more evil taking place. And that's why you see, even though it's very sad and not really acceptable, when you see, people who practice same-sex marriage or homosexuality are being attacked physically and so on and so forth, which is not acceptable. However, this is what happens in a society when the walls of uprightness and the walls of righteous living are torn down, and you replace that with the obscure and unnatural ways of living. It automatically attracts more bad things to happen, and that's exactly what we see. So even though the world may think that people who attack such people are bad, which in many ways they are, but the underlying factor is the fact that when we practice more evil and more bad things, it leaves room for more evil and more bad things to enter that sphere, and that's exactly what it is. And obviously, the other major factor is consequences. At large, most people tend to lean towards making choices. We all have the freedom to make choices. We all have the freedom to choose. But unfortunately, we don't have any control over the consequences of our choices. And I think many people don't think about that. So, whatever choice you make, I would rather and advise one that you first think about the consequences. Think about your choice and always remember that every choice, whether good or bad, it has a preset consequence tied to it. So, whatever choice you make is going to come with a consequence. If it's a good choice, most likely good consequence. Sometimes you can make a good choice and you could have some bad outcome, but that does not necessarily mean that that consequence is tied to the action. The action may be good, but you could have somebody that's jealous, or all these kind of attributes that can kind of aim to bring bad towards a person who's practicing good. But however, the underlying principle is the fact that whatever choice you make has a consequence tied to it. It's preset. So, and even being myself a Christian, the biblical point does tell you, blessings for obedience. In Deuteronomy, blessings for obedience and curses for disobedience. So that pretty much tells you that whatever choice you make is tied to a consequence, whether good or bad. So it's absolutely imperative that whatever you do in life, whether it's your sexuality, your relationships, whatever you do, one thinks very well about the choices that one makes. Then, of course, like I said, when it comes to the current world we live in, with regards to sexuality and all the other areas that we currently have issues with, the other important factor that every person on the planet needs to realize, whether you're a leader of a country or whether you're a citizen on the street, the fact that we are not the orchestrators of life on earth. We did not create ourselves. We did not create our bodies. We did not create the air we breathe in. We did not create the water that falls down as rain. We did not create the creatures in the ocean, the animals, the livestock. None of it that enables us to live and enjoy life on earth is what we've created, and even our very selves. We did not create ourselves. We're not responsible for the very organs that we have. We did not orchestrate or design them. And ultimately, no human being can take the stand that it is their body or their lives and they're free to do whatever they want to do. That is absolutely not true. Although you have a body and you live in it, it does not mean that you own it. Because at the end of the day, we did not create ourselves. We did not design ourselves. The very air that we breathe in was not created of ourselves. There's ultimately a creator who's given us that to enjoy and to be who we are. But ultimately, he has set down, God has set down the rules for living and for life, and what needs to be done and how life needs to be lived. So that is the first and foremost thing that most people don't want to pay attention to, and especially to those that want to practice all sorts of immoral and perverse behaviors. You need to understand that whatever choice you make, there will be consequences for it. But most importantly, we are not owners of ourselves. The lives we live, we are mere pilgrims passing on a journey. Eventually, it comes to an end. And once that end is done, we face the next phase where eventually the judgment of all mankind will take its course. So it's very important that you understand that. But most importantly, remember that we are not the creators of life. And we have to make sure that whatever natural order that God has set down for life and relationships has to be adhered to. And unfortunately, we have issues like the pride movement and so on, all of which are blatant causes of rebellion to instill immorality in society, and they call that freedom. And unfortunately, it's not freedom. Freedom without boundaries is no freedom at all. Freedom without boundaries and the freedom to do anything and everything you want eventually leads you to bondage, where whatever you're doing is going to create a course where you're affected by it, and that holds you ransom in a way, emotionally or physically, whatever it may be. Eventually, the freedom that you thought was freedom without boundaries brings you to a place of bondage. Whereas freedom, that is true freedom, is where you live by the statutes and the decrees and the rules and regulations that God has created for life on earth. So I want people to think about that and to really reflect on things and to remember that our lives are not our own. We did not create ourselves. We did not design ourselves, as I said. And whatever we want to practice is something that we don't have the freedom to practice. Because at the end of the day, we did not create life on earth. We are here to enjoy it. We've been created to enjoy it. But most importantly, to live by the rules and regulations that God has set down for people to follow when it comes to life. And that's pretty much the first phase of what I want to talk about. And I want those who reflect on all of these things, whether it's transgender, same-sex marriage, and so on and so forth. You really need to reflect on what you're doing. You really need to take stock of the actions and the courses, and remember that what you're doing is contrary to the natural order of life. We need to look at the world that we live in. I'm sure every one of us would agree that there's not a case in the world where either two men or two women together have naturally conceived a child or brought life to the earth. None, right? God has exclusively created or made possible for life to be sustained and procreated exclusively through a relationship between a married woman and man. And we need to respect that. And that is the thing that we have a problem with. We seem to disrespect a whole host of, statutes and decrees and natural orders that God has created on earth. And that's one of the reasons why we have the chaos that we have. And there's no such thing as equality in that area. There's no such thing as equality in marriage. The relationship or two men or two women getting married is not marriage at all. Marriage is ultimately ratified by God Himself, because marriage is not just a physical union, it's a spiritual union where He brings a man and a woman together as one unit, whereas two men and two women do not become one unit. So even though physically you may be married in your own mind, but the Creator does not recognize that. God does not recognize two men or two women being married, and neither will you ever be one, because it's entirely contrary to the natural order of what God has created. So the marriage of two women, two men will never be a marriage. It may be a union physically to those individuals, but both spiritually and physically, to God and to the world at large, it will never be recognized as a marriage union. It's only the papers that the relevant authorities would give you that allow for same-sex marriage in those countries or communities, and that's all it is. But ultimately, it's the order that God has set that takes a precedence over all these earthly ways of which things are done and allowed to be done. So we need to remember that as well, that the natural order does not work or does not function in line with what people practice. Then, of course, you have people that are becoming trans, coming out as they feel that they are men or women when they actually are, a man. You have to come to a place where you respect who you are. If you're born a man or born a male, remain that way. There's no way to be searching your feelings and trying to find out the emotions that will make you want to think otherwise. We see that at large in creation. You don't find in the animal kingdom any of the animals trying to, whichever are male or female, trying to be something else. They pretty much remain who they are. And we, as a part of creation, are called upon to do the same. The only difference is that we have a moral code that's been built into our conscience. God has put that into us. So we are even more intelligent than the animals out there. We are the height of creation, and God has given us the intelligence, the moral code to understand who we are and what we stand for. And even when it comes to relationships, God has given us evidence, the anatomy of our human body, which shows us what the different functions are of the body parts and where they fit and how they work and how they are designed and what they're designed for. So before we make all these emotional decisions where one goes according to their feelings, that they are feeling for someone for the same sex or whatever the case may be, all of which is based on feeling. And God has not designed human beings to live by feelings, but rather what's in front of you, the facts. You look at yourself in the mirror, you see what your anatomy is about, what your anatomy shows to you in terms of how your body functions, what are the purposes of each organ, and how are they designed and where they fit and how they work. So these are all the simple things, and one does not need to be, thinking that you need a whole host of thoughts. It's not rocket science to determine how things work when it comes to relationships and society. So that's pretty much my contribution for today. I pray and hope that what I've said makes sense to you. And you're welcome to comment or request further discussion. I'll be glad to do that and respond, and I'll also discuss further. But it's imperative that we, as Christians, also stand up for the wrongs that are being allowed within the countries. There's pressure all around, pressure on governments, pressure on communities to accept behaviors and things that are contrary to the natural order of life. There are many people out there who want to raise upright families, upright kids, and when you look around society, there are people that are trying to bring those down or trying to, instill confusion into those who want to have upright families and raise children and kids of integrity, uprightness, with sound moral values and codes. So those who want to practice all, other things that do not line up with the natural order of life need to understand that you can do what you want to do, but ultimately what you do should not be imposed upon others who want to live right and who want to live by the natural order of what God has instituted for all mankind. But most importantly, to reflect on what I've said, that living right is what we are made for. We are not made to live for ourselves and to do what we want to do. We don't really have that authority because, for one, we did not create ourselves. We are not of ourselves. We are merely pilgrims on a journey here on earth. So I hope you are blessed with this snippet of my contribution, and please feel free to comment if you'd like, or even request for additional discussions on other topics. I'll be glad to discuss for those with you. So pray and hope that this helps and makes a difference to you. Take care and God bless.